Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler. Uh, was talking in a previous video of when the power outage interrupted it. My points were about nothing has been more disturbing to me than to witness what's happened to so many Americans on the side of conservative America. And I connected that with how I've lived in the Shenandoah Valley for most of the last 30 some years. And I had a very meaningful and positive connection with the conservatives of this area when I did hundreds and hundreds of hours of talk radio conversations with them back in the 1990s. So it's been very disturbing to me to watch these people vote for Donald Trump, who is essentially the very opposite of the kinds of good conservative values that they expressed to me, and I believe sincerely, back in the 1990s. Just really disturbing to see that what's happened. I've had a ringside seat, whether I understand what's happened or not, but it's in any event, it's very alienating for me. My whole feeling about humankind is shaken because of being immersed in this world in which people can do what these people have been doing, to go from where they were when they expressed their Christian values and their patriotic love of the Constitution and the importance of good character. And then they end up voting for somebody who represents the very opposite of all those three things, those deep sets of value. What kind of thing is a human being that those people could become these Trump supporters? Uh, anyway, I do get to communicate with them still, but it's a one-way communication. Every week I have an op-ed in newspapers in the area where I was in 2012 the Democratic nominee for Congress. And this is a 2-to-1 Republican area. So I'm talking to them, and that is a lot my orientation. I think I can say that, I mean, I'm just sort of obsessed. Um, they are on my mind. I'm continually looking for ways of communicating something to them, which I think is, I, with respect to Trump, I'm not plagued by any degree of uncertainty. I mean, it rounds off to zero. I know that this is a really destructive thing, and that was a really bad choice that the Trump voters made. It was so obviously a bad choice that you know stuff happens, and so anyway, in one of my recent pieces, I asked the question, what is the prospect for buyer's remorse among these people who voted for Trump? And I was thinking along the lines of there is that this presidency is going to be catastrophic. I mean, it's another piece I wrote to sent off to these conservatives that the impact on all kinds of things is going to be really seriously damaging. Uh, and I put this out because I feel like I can show something to anybody who's willing to take a look. And so I keep on doing that. But there's an imperviousness there. I don't I don't particularly claim that I'm having an impact, but just do the best I can every week to compose. Most of them are messages, in a sense, to the conservatives. I think to myself, well, what are the chances that people will have buyer's remorse? And basically, most of what I think is that the overwhelming majority of the people who voted for Donald Trump were real Trump supporters. I don't know, overwhelming, but let's say he got 50% almost. I would say that 40%, most of that were people who were Trump in a deep and meaningful way. And then there are the people who are the folks who decided actually who won the election. And I have, I'm, I'm happy to say when I don't know. I don't know what exactly goes on in people's minds. But my impression, what I'm imagining is the case that when Trump went from an approval level of something like 40% up to getting almost 50% of the vote, that a lot of that extra 10% was people whose level of information and understanding of the political world so sparse, so rudimentary, so little the product of any serious taking on any kind of job about really understanding anything. Now, I don't know that. I don't have a lot of experience. And even if I have a lot of contact with people who are what I was imagining in terms of their level of lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, I don't have those kinds of conversations with those people. I don't really know. But based on such fragmentary experience of what people do and don't know, I'm imagining that there's a whole 5 or 6% of people who, when they voted for Trump, had no real idea of what he represented and what was at stake in whether you have a democracy or not, or the rule of law or not. They just hadn't really spent much of their life energy thinking about any of that stuff. Okay. I think that those people would have buyer's remorse if the events that come from this actually bring home to them, so that even they notice that things aren't so good in some way that hits them. Maybe it'll have to do with plane crashes or measles outbreaks or things like that actually end up having an impact, or Social Security payments. That if it's catastrophic in a way that gets onto their picture of the world, they might say, yeah, I'm sorry I voted for him. I had no idea he was going to do this crap. This is just me fantasizing, just to label that again. But then we get to the people that are really much more of interest to me and more disturbing to me. And that's the people who actually have been on this journey for it wasn't like in the last weeks of the campaign they decided, well, I'll vote for him instead of her. And by the way, I think the fact that Kamala Harris was a woman of color also accounts for some of the people who voted for Trump, who might not otherwise have done so. But then there are the people who are with Trump. And I've been watching this. Being with Trump it didn't come out of nowhere. It was already getting baked into the Republican mind back even in the 90s with Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh and then W and Cheney and Rove. And a lot of stuff was already leading people into I'm going to put, maybe I should wait to put it in these words, but I won't, but to mistake the evil for the good. That I think is the essence of the frightening transformation that has taken place in conservative America. I don't think the Republican Party of Eisenhower, like when I was growing up as a boy, or later of Reagan, I don't think either of those Republican parties were of the nature of where these people have been led to. And so what what impresses me is that for a lot of people, admitting that they were wrong about Trump would actually open up a whole chasm. I mean, if they've made the trip from Ronald Reagan's Republican Party to Donald Trump's Republican Party, lost touch with reality, they are they have relinquished all the standards that were essential to their picture of what was of value and of importance back when they were genuine conservatives. Like, people don't like to admit that they were wrong, but this is being wrong at a really deep level and on a really big thing, because most of the people, I believe, that are supporters of Trump have been before that supporters of other forms of something really contrary to the values that they used to hold. You could say, I would say, that the conservative America under Ronald Reagan was a repository of a considerable amount of American virtue. It wasn't just virtues, but there were some genuine American virtues that were buried in it. Some of it got romanticized and manipulated, mourning in America. But there was actually in the conservative Republican mind of that time some image of the way things are supposed to be that had a morally positive quality. By the time you get to the Republican Party, even of George W. Bush's first presidency, already there's being a cultivation of ugliness. And what happened is that there was a progression of propaganda experiences over a number of years that painted a different picture of the world and put them in a different frame of mind than the one which, just to name an example, the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan's time, or certainly Eisenhower's time, had there been an Access Hollywood tape appearing a month before the election, the Republican base would have rejected that. But it had changed. And it had changed in a way that would have been considered by themselves of a generation before as embracing evil. Things that they used to regard as evil, they got manipulated and led and misled into by the time that we got Donald Trump. They've been misled to mistake the evil for the good. And that's what I think the fundamental problem of the conservative America has been. By the way, the fundamental problem on liberal America's point is not having a understanding of something reasonable to call the battle between good and evil. So they didn't recognize something when it was rising, and they didn't fight it the way it needed to be fought or when it needed to be fought. And so here we are with fascism. And going back to the supporter of this fascism, as it was already arising with Newt Gingrich, with his propaganda techniques taken from the Nazis, with his big lies, with his use of language to divide the American people, teaching conservatives to see people on the other side as evil, or abnormal, I guess, was one of his psychological injection techniques to make liberals seem beyond the pale and somebody you just had to treat as a moral leper or a bitter enemy. That's how fascism works. And Newt Gingrich was one of the practitioners, and so was Rush Limbaugh. Anyway, when I was growing up, a friend of the family I knew, and I knew of his life enough to know that finding that he had been wrong, very wrong, about something that he had put very central to his perception of the world and his action in the world. Back in the 1930s, he was one of those many people who had an image of Joseph Stalin that was positive, who worked with the idea that the communist regime in the Soviet Union was a source of some valuable guidance about what should be happening politically in America. And he, along the way, the various things that Stalin did eventually provoked an awakening on his part, where he saw the magnitude of his mistake, that he had mistaken the evil for the good. And he not only rejected the role that he played as a political actor who supported something which he now saw was as ugly as it was, but he was shaken in his own sense of himself, because the question arose, what does it mean that I could be so wrong about something so important for as long as I was? And this was at that point in the 30s, a young man, sort of college age, and maybe some high school. I don't know if that was included or not. But the result was, for him, in terms of his biography, at least this was how it was seen in my family, was that this man never really recovered from feeling so shaken in his own judgment that there was a movement from being certain about something, fervent about something, to discovering that he'd mistaken the evil for the good, and then saying, if I can be wrong about this, what can I trust about me? So when I think also about my image of the men out there that my pieces would be inviting to admit that they were wrong, and this is what they used to call evil, my guess is that, well, for one thing, they hear me as a partisan, which is not what I am, but there's no way they were not. For them to hear me as what I think I am would already be giving up the game. And it's contrary to the culture. My business has been, looking about what's going on in the human world and seeing the patterns and drawing the conclusion and saying this Republican Party has become a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken in the human world. And that is my definition of evil. This man was from a subculture that was probably more conducive to being able to admit one was wrong. But I don't know, that may not be true. There is in the Christian tradition being hit on the road to Damascus and changing one's sides because of what has been revealed. It's happened to St. Paul. There is the dying to be reborn aspect of things in the Christian tradition. But in the conservative, particularly rural tradition, I don't think that there's a lot of sense that discovering one had made a really big fundamental mistake can play a constructive role in one's life. I think that's a rarity. In that world in particular, it may be, somewhat of a rarity in general that people are willing to admit something like what a lot of these people would have to admit about if they I guess they could repudiate their vote for Trump by saying, "Oh yeah, this didn't work out. I thought he'd be able to do a better job." Maybe they wouldn't take it all the way to saying, "I mistook the evil for the good, and I did that for a whole generation." And that would be hard. I'm rather big on admitting that I'm wrong. I think it's an ethic I believe in because my real purpose in life is sort of like to get ever better understanding of things, and that means noticing when I make mistakes and trying to correct them so I don't do it in the future, and admitting I don't know so I know where the blanks, what questions still need to be asked. It's easy for me to do those things, and I think that in the male culture on the right, it's very different. You don't say I don't know if you don't have to, and maybe even if you do. And you don't say I was wrong. I don't remember ever seeing John Wayne say was wrong or give a real apology. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but I liked the John Wayne characters. But it's a different ethic from the one I practice. My practicing that is also has a strategic effort, even though I know it's futile. I don't want them to see me as a partisan. I want them to see me as a truth seeker and somebody who's been, working his whole life to be able to say things about topics like what I describe, and having been trained by top universities in the United States to be able to practice such a thing. But I know it's not gonna happen. But I nonetheless, for my own sake, I just dramatize. I'm willing to say when I don't know. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. I'm after the truth and working hard to get it. But the things I admit that I'm wrong about, they're way easier than what I'm wanting to have happen. I just feel so alienated from people who would vote for something that was so obviously the very opposite of what any Christian or American patriot or person of decent who cares about decency of character, just the opposite of what you want. With all the personality traits on full display that are the opposite of what you want in the president of the United States. You don't want corporate leaders to think, geez, if I exercise my constitutional rights, the president of the United States is going to abuse his power to punish me. How do they get there? But in any event, however it is, a lot of these people made a very profound trip. They didn't notice when they crossed out of the land of the mostly good and entered into the land of the pretty much altogether evil. And that's what they did. And to admit that you had done that would be hard. I mean, like the guy who had to admit that as a very young man and only probably for a period of a few years, gave his allegiance to Stalin. That's even less than admitting that, say, for a whole generation, you followed the president, the Republican Party that had been in Reagan and then the first Bush, and then became the Republican Party of Gingrich and Limbaugh and Karl Rove and onward into this ugliness. And they never noticed that they were crossing the basic line that separates good and evil. Yeah, they're not going to do it. And it's scary and painful to me to think about how far astray people can be led that there was enough brokenness in those people that they could be exploited in that way, that they could be led to support what they used to consider evil. It's disturbing to me because I used to see people, because of maybe the America I grew up in, I used to see people in very positive terms. I mean, not like I was in a Pollyanna world, but basically I felt, I'm fairly proud to be a human being like the other human beings. And when I look at this, I feel like, well, I don't want anybody to be vulnerable, to be seduced in that way, to abandon the things in them that were sort of life-serving and good and help make the world a better place by a force seducing them to take them over onto the side where it destroys things, the coherent force that consistently works to make things worse. So they'll go to their graves always thinking that they had been the righteous ones. If there was a catastrophe, well, it wasn't because they voted for Trump, and it wasn't Trump's fault. I don't know what would happen, but one thing I'm aware of living here in Virginia is that a leader who leads you into catastrophe doesn't stop being a hero for that. That's really quite a remarkable thing that you can see in the Confederacy. All these things named after, to take the top guy, Jefferson Davis. But all over, all the celebration of the Confederacy, the nation that was formed in 1861 in order to declare itself no longer part of the United States. That nation was about white supremacy, and it was based on a lie. The Confederate flag going through with the mob carrying it into the Capitol on January 6th insurrection tells you what a disturbing thing was done with that lie. The Confederate flag has played a destructive role. And here in Virginia, making a hero out of somebody who led you into disaster is an established part of the culture. So even if it turns out that I'm right and Trump's becoming president is a full-blown national catastrophe, and even if they actually see the consequences, if you could make a hero out of the people who made a set of decisions that brought down a nightmare that they took generations to recover from in the Confederacy. Even if you could make such a terrible decision as a leader, as Jefferson Davis, they'll name highways after you. So given that, they may not be impressed to think that just because the consequences of electing Trump were to have catastrophe befall the country in whatever ways may be in store. That may not be something they would hold against him. I don't understand quite how you get from the catastrophe that the Civil War was, for the whole country, of course, but especially for the South. I don't know how you get to being able to get the people to maintain their allegiance to such a thing. The decision to secede was a disaster. And then they named highways after Jefferson Davis for generations after that. So I don't know. A lot of reasons why I just think that a lot of people are going to go to their graves. No matter what happens from here, uh, they're going to go to their graves and they're not going to say, boy, I was wrong in 2024 when I voted for Donald Trump. Thanks for listening. If you aren't subscribed, I would be gratified if you did subscribe. If you want to like this video, I'd be gratified about that. Encouragement is welcome. There's a loneliness out here on the edge of the mountains, 2 miles east of the West Virginia line, up there on the top of Great North Mountain. It's a lonely thing to reach out to try to share the fruits of my labors as best I can. So your encouragement would be appreciated. And in addition to encouraging me, the main thing I'm here for is to get people to see an integrated picture I've put together that explains a lot about the situation of our species and of us as Americans. That's laid out as well as I can in as much abundance as you want to take in on my website, betterhumanstory.org. There are a lot of things there. The fruit of, it depends on when you want to say, but more than half a century for sure, of continually trying to understand what's going on in the world that we're living in, this world of civilization, which looks like it could destroy itself and is having a lot of struggles that aren't all going really well. So betterhumanstory.org. I think I have a couple answers there that put some important things in a fundamentally different light. So take a look. Thank you. Bye-bye.